Today we're going to be changing the engine oil on a newer model, well not that new, 2014 Yamaha 50 horsepower outboard. That would be 50 there. Yeah. I'm going to assume that if you're watching this video you're not super confident with changing the engine oil, so I'm going to go through some of the real simple stuff and show you how easy it is to change the engine oil. And we'll get you through this. I'm going to set this first thing we're going to do, let's have a look, make sure we've got enough supplies. So we're going to need an oil filter. We're using a Sierra 8700 for this one. I'll zoom in a little bit there. Let's try that button there. There we go. We use a lot of Sierra oil filters. They're a good quality oil filter. Nothing wrong with them. You'll need a wrench of some sort to get the oil filter off. They're in a real tight spot on the side of the motor. I like these cup style ones. They go right over the top of the oil filter and work really well. A wrench for the oil filter tool. A little bit of grease. If you've watched my other videos, Quicksilver 24C is my go-to for pretty much everything. And a socket, 14 mil for the oil drain plug. Oh, and rags. You're going to need rags. There's no way you're going to do this without getting oil on yourself. Drain plug, drain pan, drain the oil into, and the outboard motor. So let's I'll set this up in the stand here. Cover off. There. So we've got, this is a pretty standard layout for a lot of the Yamaha outboards, four-stroke outboards, the newer ones, for the last 15 years anyway. Oil filter on the side here. You can see it's really hard to get to. You start using a traditional oil filter wrench on there, you're going to hit your coils and the wiring and stuff. I've seen people do it with multi-grips. It's kind of agricultural, but it can work because you can get in there a little bit. Like I said, this oil filter wrench tool here, it goes on there real nice. Makes it real simple. Yamahas are wonderful because, let's see if I can get that up right. They show you exactly how much oil you need. Oops. Losing it. Let's find it there. There we go. And what grade and rating that you want for it. So I found that their chart there on the motor is always pretty accurate as far as the volumes required. To get the oil out of a Yamaha outboard motor on these models and most of them, the smaller ones, there's a right down here. It looks like an exhaust outlet, but it's not. If you look way up inside there, let's see if we can get a light in there so you can see even better. There you go. There's your oil pan drain plug. That's where the oil is going to come out. You'll hear pretty much everyone will say warm your motor up before changing the engine oil. I'm not convinced that that's an absolute necessity. It does speed things up, but also gives you very hot oil to deal with. The other side of that, my thoughts are the oil's been sitting for a long time in the oil pan. All the heavy stuff will settle to the bottom when you're draining it out. So, can you see what we're doing here? Okay, so we're going to solve it a bit and zoom down. Drain pan, you can see that. Okay. Little balancing act here. Pull the drain plug out. So I've loosened it there. I have this great handy little attachment on there, but any deep socket will do and you can spin it out. And there's our oil. Like I said, this is changing it hot, changing it cold. Only takes a couple more minutes for it to drain when it's cold. Not a big deal. Helps if the motor's trimmed all the way down. Tilts it back a little bit so that it comes out the end there. One thing you need to be careful of is, let's see if I can see this, making sure that the washer stays on your drain plug. This seals it when you put it back together. Sometimes it'll stay stuck up in there. And let's see if we can get a real good close-up there. Yeah. It'll stay stuck up in there and pop out halfway through draining your oil, so it's in the bottom of your drain pan. When you put that plug back in without that washer on there, you're going to have a leak. So let that oil drain for another moment or two. This motor's only got 12 hours on it since our last oil change, so it's not particularly dirty. There's the last of it. Put that back in. Do I need to tell you to dispose of your oil in an environmentally friendly way in today's day and age? I'm sure you know that. Pretty much all your auto parts places will take the oil wherever you got your replacement oil from. Will take your old oil. Tighten up your drain plug. They don't need to be super tight, just tight enough that they don't come out again. That's easy for me to say because I do this all the time. But you can see that I did not reef on that super hard. That's about 12 inches long, and yeah, I put a little bit of weight on it. Tight enough so it doesn't come undone again. Get that last little bit of oil out of there. And the oil's out. It's as simple as that. Now we'll go up to the oil filter. This. I'm playing cameraman as well here, so bear with me. I think it's pretty tolerable like this. I usually stuff a rag down underneath here. Some of them drain, some of them leak, some of them don't. I can never remember which ones. So in case a bit of oil comes out of that. And this, you can see the date on there. That's when I changed the oil last on this. We installed this motor for the customer in June of 2020. He had bought it from a friend of his. Long story, but that's why it says 0 hours on there. I always put the date and the number of hours on the oil filter for reference. Spin that off. You see we lost a little bit of oil there, but not too bad. I like to make sure that the gasket surface in there is nice and clean. Just in here, make sure that's all nice and clean. Sometimes, not so much on these little outboards, but sometimes this seal will pop off. Pop right out of there like that when you take the oil filter off, and it'll stay stuck on there. You want to make sure that it's not stuck on there like that. Get that out of there. If you put your new oil filter on top of the old oil filter gasket, you will definitely have an ugly leak. You'll pump all your oil out in a matter of a couple of seconds. They leak a lot of oil quickly. New oil filter. Take the wrap off it. A little bit of grease. Make sure we can see what we're doing here. Doesn't take much. I'll just put a little grease on the sealing surface there. This is what stops the gasket from sticking to that to the block when you take it off next time. Now, one more little detail. Let's see if we can zoom in. There, just like that. Hard to read this, but 2/3 to 1 turn after the gasket contacts the base. So I'll give you a little demo here. We'll put that on, spin it on. So just until it just starts, you feel it sort of firm up on the gasket there. So now the gasket is touching the surface. Grab a pen and I'll show you exactly what. Now we want to tighten it another 2/3 to 1 turn. So we'll put a mark there. And we'd spin that around. That would be, when that gets down to the bottom, it would be half a turn. That'd be 3/4 of a turn. It gets all the way up, it would be a full turn. So I generally use my wrench here. Now I just put this this sticker up the top, so that's my reference point. So that's a half a turn. It's gone right down the bottom. There's 3/4 of a turn, and that's getting pretty firm, so that's all it's going to need. And it won't come off again if you follow that 2/3 to 1 turn tight. Now, if I remember correctly, this was 12 hours, and it is February. So we'll put the date on there. And the number of engine hours on it. I usually use the hours that show on the gauge so that I can reference it quickly. Sometimes the engine hours in the ECM when I scan the computer will be different. So this gives me a reference. Next time I see the motor, it also gives a reference for the customer so that you can have a look and see when the oil was changed last. Our customers are wonderful. They come in every 12 months at least and get their oil changed. So we're pretty good there. And then, so we've got our drain plug is back in, oil filter's on. All that's left now is to put some oil into it. I'm going to line you up here. There we go. So like I said before, the specs are just on top for how much oil it takes and what grade. We do oil in bulk here. So I've already measured it out and have a container full. These are often pretty tight. I use a little wrench on them just to get them started. So this motor calls for 2.1 liters of engine oil with the oil filter change. I've got 2 liters of oil in my jug here. We're using 1030 marine grade oil. Meets all the specs that are on your sticker there, the SESF API specs. You definitely want to follow those specs. They're very important. That's 2 liters of oil in there. If you run the motor with that off, you'll spray oil everywhere. It's ugly. I'll come around this side. Let's see what we're looking at here. So the dipsticks on these are kind of a little bit tricky to find. There we go. just in here, just in that yellow dot right there is our dipstick. Now the one thing about these outboards, pretty much all four-stroke outboards, the new ones, do what they call make oil. And I'm going to do a video on that in the future. In a nutshell, because the oil pan is down here, the oil stays nice and cold. Stays too cold, and it doesn't boil all the a lot of the contaminants out of it. So the fuel that bypasses the rings and condensation and so forth get into that oil and literally raise the oil level in your crankcase. So if we can look at this here, where is it? There. Zoom in a bit, see if we can find. Okay, where'd it go? There it is. I'll just do it like this. So on the dipstick here we have, grab a pen and I'll highlight them. There's a mark here. There's a mark here on the bottom of our dipstick, but it goes in like that. And you can see those marks now. Now on your car, this is an add mark and this is a full mark. On the Yamaha outboards, this is the operating range. They call that the operating range. This is not add and full. This is where they want the oil. So you can have the oil level as low as that or as high as that. When we're changing the oil here, because these motors have a tendency to make oil, I aim for about right in the middle as the oil level. By the time I see it next time, it will be up to the full mark pretty much every time. So halfway between the bottom mark and the top, you can see it's all cross-hatched in there. I think you can see that is where you want to have your oil level. So now I've run it, or I haven't run this motor yet. I've only just put the oil in. So the oil filter is dry still. Let's see what the 2 liters gave us. And this is going to be pretty much spot on. Get our pen back again. So there's my top mark there still. There's the bottom mark there. That's what I'm aiming for. We've got it about right there right now, and still see, yep. And so when I run it up and fill the oil filter up, it'll come back to this level here, and it'll be pretty much spot on. So that's what we're aiming for. So that's the oil change done. Our next step is to actually run the motor, and then that will fill the oil filter up. When we're running the motor, we're going to check the oil filter and make sure it's not leaking, and then we'll check our oil level. So I'm just going to stop the camera here for a minute while I back this out and hook up the muffs and stuff so that we can run it up. Okay, here we've got the boat outside, backed it out of the shop a little bit. I'm standing in front of it there. So we need to put some ear muffs on it. Ear muffs, outboard muffs, these are for running the motor on the hose. I've got a little valve here to turn the water off and on right there. You see the bottom there pretty clear. Now on these smaller motors, the water pickup is quite far forward. If I slide this on from the front, it'll have a tendency to fall off. So I put these on backwards quite often, making sure it doesn't interfere with the propeller. You can see there, I've just lifted it up a bit so it's not hitting on the propeller. Put that on. Water on that. See, I've got the motor trimmed up a little bit there. I did that to move it out, so we'll trim it down to its level. See everything that's going on there. We'll turn our water on. I turn it on just a bit to start. Spraying water everywhere. check anyway. That's as long as you need to run that to fill your oil filter. It's your oil level will be, all your oil passages will all be filled up. Your oil filter will be filled up and everything like that. So now the next thing on these things, when you're changing the oil and when you're checking your oil level, in particular when you're checking your oil level, sorry, the cylinders are horizontal on these motors. So the pistons are going up and down in the cylinders this way. Now oil's been getting sprayed around in there. It actually sits in the bottoms of the cylinders and can form puddles. A lot of times the motor's trimmed all the way down like this, and the oil will run down and gather on the back of the piston. If you leave your motor trimmed down like that when it's sitting in the water and you come out and start it up a few hours later or the next morning, sometimes you get a big cloud of blue smoke. That's from all the oil that's run down the cylinders and collected on in the combustion chamber. Before you check your oil level, you need to trim your motor up so that the oil that's collected in those cylinders drains down into your crankcase and into this lower level. Leave it tilted up like that for a couple of minutes before you check your oil level. I'll just take the earmuffs off here, put the hose away. So I'm going to push this boat back inside now, and then we'll check the oil level. Okay, back inside where it's warm again. It's still February and winter here. So the motor's been trimmed up like that for a couple of minutes. We'll trim it back down to level. Now by level, what I mean, this is another simple thing, but the cav plate. The cavitation plate, or anti-cavitation plate really, parallel with the ground. That's level. That gives us everything's flat and pointed the right way there then. Let the oil settle a little bit for a minute or two. Pull the dipstick out. Clean it off. I'm just going to put my marks back on there so that you can see what I'm looking at. That's our bottom. There's our bottom mark and there's our top mark. And again, I'm aiming for right in the middle of those two. That's where I like to see it, as it's going to raise up through the course of the season while this owner's using his boat. Push it in all the way down, make sure it's seated, and pull it straight back out again. And you can see we are just slightly below halfway through up. So I'm real happy with that. Like I said, Yamaha, from the bottom mark to the top mark is the operating range. It could be even lower than that and it would still be totally acceptable for Yamaha. So, and that's pretty much exactly what I was aiming for an oil level. These engines hold so little oil to try and raise it an eighth of an inch or more. An eighth of an inch on your dipstick would be like maybe a couple of tablespoons of oil. So I'm happy with that. And that's all there is to it. The oil change is done. Make sure your dipstick's in all the way. Make sure your oil filler cap on the back here. Make sure that's all snugged up. And double check your oil filter for any leakage. And that it's nice and dry underneath. And your oil change is done. Thanks for sharing it with me. Everything you need for your oil change, you can get that at CanadaWideMarine.com. If you're not sure what oil filter or oil that you need, send us a message, give us a call. We'll need your serial number and the year model of your motor. And we can, with those two pieces of information, we can tell you, make sure you get the exact right parts, oil filter, oil, and any other parts that you need for it. Spark plugs, fuel filter. This motor is going to get a fuel filter change as well. We're going to change his gear lube and everything like that as well. So anything you need, CanadaWideMarine.com. Thank you.